Let me tell you something that might sting a little, but it'll wake you up. You are not lazy because you lack talent. You're lazy because you've allowed the wrong patterns to run your life. And here's the truth. Any pattern that's been created can be destroyed and rebuilt. Laziness is not a personality trait. It's a loop, a habit loop of comfort, hesitation, and distraction. You wake up, you feel tired. You scroll, you delay, and before you know it, another day's gone. And if you let that happen long enough, it starts defining your life. But you are not meant to live in survival mode. You are built for purpose, not passivity. Now, here's what most people don't understand. Energy doesn't come from energy drinks or motivation videos. It comes from purpose. You move faster when what you're chasing means something to you. Emotion creates motion. The reason you're still stuck is because you haven't tied your actions to something that sets your soul on fire. You haven't connected your daily tasks to a future that excites you. The next thing is this. Your standards are silently deciding your fate. If you accept excuses, if you let yourself skip the workout, if you keep saying, I'll start tomorrow, then tomorrow becomes next week, and next week becomes next year. Raise your standard. Make laziness unacceptable. Tell yourself, this is no longer who I am. But here's the trap. You can have all the fire in the world, but if your environment is built to distract you, you're going to lose. Your phone, your room, your friends, your social media. These things shape your energy. They either pull you toward growth or numb you into delay. Want to kill laziness? Start by mastering your space. Surround yourself with drive, not distractions. Now let's talk about discipline. Everyone talks about motivation, but that's not what gets you results. Motivation comes and goes. Discipline is built through repetition. Do it when you don't feel like it. Do it when no one's clapping. That's where your new identity is formed. The person you admire, the one who gets things done, they're not more gifted than you. They're just more consistent. And this is the final shift. Start living for your future self, not your current mood. The person you want to become, the stronger, sharper, more alive version of you, is begging you to show up today. Not perfectly, just consistently. When you start acting like the future version of yourself, laziness can't survive. You stop choosing what's easy and start choosing what builds you. So let me ask you now, how much longer are you going to let the old version of you make decisions for your life? The comfort zone feels good in the moment, but is quietly stealing your potential. This is the moment you draw the line. You kill laziness by starving it. You take control of your life by deciding that from this moment on, you move, you rise, you take back your time, your focus, and your power. Because nothing changes until you do. You've probably told yourself at some point, I'm just lazy, as if laziness is some fixed part of your identity. But here's what most people don't understand. It's not who you are, it's what you've repeated. Laziness isn't a flaw in your character, it's a deeply ingrained pattern. And the more you reinforce that pattern through behavior, the more it becomes part of your automatic identity. But if something can be trained into you, it can also be trained out. That's the starting point of change. Because if you believe laziness is who you are, you'll never try to fight it. But if you realize it's just a habit loop, a pattern, you can break it. You can dismantle it and rebuild something stronger in its place. Every habit, every behavior, and every reaction in your life is rooted in repetition. The first time you skip a task, procrastinate on a decision, or scroll instead of showing up, your brain takes note. It feels a little guilty at first, maybe a little anxious, but it also feels comfort, and that comfort becomes familiar. Familiarity becomes preference. And over time, preference becomes identity. You've trained your nervous system to choose comfort over progress. That's all laziness is. A system of shortcuts and mental rehearsals your brain clings to because it's easier than effort. This isn't about shame or judgment, it's about awareness. You didn't consciously choose to become lazy. It wasn't one decision, it was a series of small decisions that went unnoticed. A few extra minutes in bed, one more episode, putting off the workout until tomorrow. And over time, those micro decisions built a macro reality. They created the version of you that now feels stuck, tired, unmotivated. But that version of you is not final. It's just rehearsed. What you rehearse, you reinforce. So if you want to change your reality, you have to interrupt the rehearsals. You have to start rewiring your brain to seek progress instead of avoiding pain. That means you must become hyper-aware of your patterns, not in a vague way, but in a detailed, precise way. When do you procrastinate most? What triggers it? What time of day? What's your body language like when you're putting things off? Laziness thrives in unconscious repetition. The moment you shine a spotlight on it, you strip it of its power. Now here's where science backs this up. Your brain has a reward system that craves dopamine, the chemical that gives you a sense of pleasure and satisfaction. The problem is, quick hits like scrolling, junk food, or endless entertainment flood your brain with dopamine with little effort. So your brain gets addicted to easy wins. That's the biochemical side of laziness. You've trained your brain to seek maximum pleasure with minimum investment. And unless you consciously shift what your brain finds rewarding, you'll keep choosing laziness, not because you want to, but because your system is rigged for it. So what's the antidote? You have to teach your brain to enjoy the grind. You have to make effort feel good again. And the only way to do that is to start winning at small, controlled levels. Make your bed, take a cold shower, finish that one task you've been putting off. Not because these things will change your life by themselves, but because they send a new message to your nervous system. I'm in control now. Each tiny action becomes a vote for a different identity. And when you stack enough of those votes, you create momentum. And when you build momentum, you build belief. Belief is everything. Because if you believe laziness is who you are, you won't try. But when you begin to see it as something you do, and more importantly, something you can undo, you unlock your power. The key is consistency. You don't kill laziness by doing one hard thing once. You kill it by doing one intentional thing every day until laziness becomes unnatural, until action feels automatic, until you no longer identify as the person who tries to change, but as the person who has changed. This isn't magic. This is mastery. It's psychology. It's neuroscience. And it's the brutal honesty of taking responsibility for the patterns you've allowed and deciding to rewrite them. You don't need a miracle. You need to interrupt the pattern. You need to break the cycle and replace it with something real, something lasting, something rooted in self-respect. Because once you do that, you stop negotiating with your potential. You stop making room for excuses, and you start building a life that moves, a life that creates, a life that proves. Every single day, that laziness was never who you were. It was just a pattern you forgot to challenge. People think they need more motivation to get moving. They wait for it like it's supposed to fall from the sky, hoping one morning they'll wake up bursting with energy, ready to conquer everything on their list. But that moment rarely comes. And when it does, it doesn't last. Why? Because motivation isn't what truly moves people. Emotion does. The depth of emotion you attach to something is what gives it power. And if your goals are just logical and not emotional, you'll never feel the pull strong enough to override laziness. You don't act based on what's smart. You act based on what you feel. That's the truth about human behavior. You know you should work out. You know you should study. You know you should start the business, wake up earlier, stop procrastinating. But knowledge alone doesn't spark action. If it did, everyone with a book or a YouTube video would be unstoppable. The real difference lies in emotional leverage. If there's no urgency, no passion, no personal meaning behind a task, your brain doesn't prioritize it. That's why most people stay stuck. They know what to do, but they don't feel why they must do it. The mind is driven by the desire to avoid pain and gain pleasure. And here's where most people fall into a trap. They unconsciously associate more pain to taking action than staying still. Working out feels hard, waking up early feels uncomfortable, taking a risk feels scary. So they delay. They choose comfort now and pain later. But that decision is based on short-term emotion not long-term outcome. And that's the exact mindset laziness feeds on. It whispers, you can do it later because later doesn't hurt. Not yet. To flip the script, you have to rewire what your brain links pain and pleasure to. That means you must learn to emotionally anchor pleasure to discipline and massive pain to inaction. You've got to look at what staying lazy actually costs you, not just in productivity, but in your confidence, your self-respect, your goals, your future. Because when you emotionally connect to that loss, when you really feel it, not just think it, but feel it in your gut, something shifts. The pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of change. That's when laziness dies, because your brain no longer sees action as something to avoid. It sees it as a necessity. Emotion creates urgency. If you've ever had a moment in your life when you were on fire, when you didn't wait, you didn't think twice, you just moved, it was because something stirred your emotions. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was inspiration. Maybe someone told you you couldn't do it and you had to prove them wrong. Whatever it was, it activated something deeper than logic. It activated your drive. And that drive came from emotion, not thought. You can't fight laziness with logic. You fight it by feeling something powerful enough to override the excuses. You have to tie your actions to something bigger than the task itself. You're not just going to the gym, you're proving to yourself that you don't quit on your health. You're not just studying, you're building the future no one else will hand you. You're not just getting up early, you're showing your younger self that you respect their dreams. When your reason is emotional, your movement becomes automatic. You no longer negotiate with yourself because your heart is louder than your mind. But let's be clear, this isn't about being emotional all the time. It's about using emotion strategically. Create rituals that remind you of what's at stake. Look at your goals daily. Visualize the pain of staying stuck and the power of rising. Watch your language, because your words shape your emotional state. Don't say, I have to. Say, I get to. Say, this matters. Say, this changes everything. You're not trying to convince your brain, you're trying to activate it. Because once you attach meaning to movement, your energy shifts. Laziness can't survive in the presence of purpose. Not when the fire inside you is greater than the resistance around you. The people who get the most done, who move with intensity, aren't superhuman. They've just tied their actions to a story that lights them up. They don't rely on motivation. They rely on emotion. They've learned that when you feel it, you'll fight for it. When you own it emotionally, your body follows. So the next time you're stuck, don't ask for more motivation. Ask, what am I not feeling yet? What emotion have I failed to connect to this goal? Because once you find that emotion, once you attach deep personal meaning to the action in front of you, your body will start to move. And laziness will no longer be an option. Your life is a direct reflection of what you've decided to tolerate. That's a hard truth, but it's the truth. The standard you hold for yourself determines the behavior you allow. And that standard becomes the invisible script running your day-to-day decisions. If your standard is low, you'll let laziness creep in. And it won't feel wrong, it'll feel normal. And the moment laziness feels normal, you stop fighting it. You make peace with your own underperformance. You justify it. You say things like, I'm just tired, or I'll start tomorrow, or at least I'm doing something. Not realizing those phrases are killing your potential one compromise at a time. High achievers don't have more time. They don't have some magical energy source. What they have is a higher standard, a different level of what they accept from themselves. It's not about being perfect, it's about being consistent with what matters. And that consistency comes from deciding what is and isn't acceptable for your life. Laziness doesn't stand a chance when your identity won't tolerate it. People say they want to change, but deep down, they haven't raised the bar. They still allow too much wiggle room. They're still negotiating with themselves every morning. They still entertain the idea that effort is optional. But here's the thing. If you leave the door open for laziness, even a crack, It will walk in and take over because laziness loves comfort. And comfort is seductive when your standards are weak. You have to slam that door shut. You have to decide that certain behaviors are no longer welcome in your life, not because you're trying to be someone else, but because you're finally choosing to become the version of yourself you were meant to be. Raising your standards isn't just about working harder. It's about expecting more from yourself in the areas that matter. It's about deciding that excuses no longer belong in your vocabulary. That quitting halfway isn't a personality trait, it's a temporary habit you're done with. That showing up late, skipping workouts, procrastinating on important goals, all those things aren't you anymore. They don't match your identity. And once they don't match your identity, your brain starts rejecting them automatically. That's where change gets real. You see, behavior follows identity. If your identity says, I'm someone who finishes what I start, you'll push through the resistance. If your identity says, I'm someone who lives with discipline, you won't wait to feel ready, you'll move anyway. But if your identity says, I'm someone who struggles with motivation, or I'm just a procrastinator, you'll live up to that version of yourself without even thinking. The only way to upgrade your life is to upgrade the standards that shape that identity. Most people set goals, but they don't raise standards. That's why they fail. A goal without a standard is just a wish. You might want to get fit, build a business, wake up early, be more focused, but if your standard still allows you to hit snooze, scroll for hours, eat poorly, and avoid discomfort, then the goal means nothing. You haven't made a decision. You've made a hope. And hope without discipline is dead on arrival. So how do you raise your standard? It starts by deciding what's no longer acceptable in your life. You draw a line. You say, this version of me dies here. Not in a dramatic way, but in a real, non-negotiable way. And then you reinforce that new standard every day through behavior. It doesn't have to be massive. You don't have to transform overnight. But every time you act in alignment with the new standard, even in small ways, you send a powerful message to your brain. This is who I am now. Change doesn't stick when it's fueled by pressure. It sticks when it's aligned with identity. And the fastest way to reshape identity is to commit to a higher standard and live it over and over until your nervous system gets the message. You don't have to fight laziness every day if you simply stop giving it a place to live. You stop giving it oxygen. You stop feeding it with exceptions and justifications. You don't need more time. You need fewer excuses. When your standard becomes, I don't tolerate laziness, something shifts. Your actions catch up. Your energy rises. Your confidence builds. You don't need someone to hold you accountable. You become accountable to yourself. And that kind of ownership, that level of personal integrity, is where laziness dies and leadership begins. Most people blame themselves for being lazy, not realizing that their environment is silently scripting their actions. Your surroundings shape your energy, your focus, your drive, even your decisions. Whether you like it or not, you are constantly being influenced by what you see, what you hear, who you're around, and what you allow into your space. Laziness doesn't always come from a lack of will. It often comes from an environment that encourages inactivity and rewards comfort. If your environment is built to distract, you will be distracted. If it's designed for comfort, you'll default to ease. And over time, you start thinking the problem is you, when really, you've been fighting against the current the entire time. There's a reason highly productive people fiercely protect their space. It's not about being obsessive. It's about understanding the science. Your brain is constantly scanning your environment for cues, signals, and patterns. If every time you sit at your desk, you open a new tab to scroll, or you keep your phone within arm's reach, you're training your brain to associate that space with avoidance, not action. If your room is cluttered, if your notifications are always on, if your workspace is shared with entertainment, your focus never stands a chance. You're not failing, you're trying to focus in a place designed for distraction. Think about this. The average person checks their phone over 100 times a day. Not because they want to, but because their environment allows it. The phone's within reach, The apps are engineered to pull attention. The lighting, the sounds, the vibration, they all send a signal. Interrupt yourself now. And then we wonder why we can't concentrate. Your environment is either setting you up for success or sabotaging your momentum. There is no neutral ground. The background matters more than people think. What you surround yourself with becomes what you settle into. If you want to kill laziness, one of the fastest ways is to redesign the space around you. You don't need a new house. You need new boundaries. Rearrange your workspace. Remove visual clutter. Keep your phone in another room during focused work. Put your workout clothes where you can see them. Set up your kitchen for healthy choices. Make your environment reflect the behavior you want, not the behavior you're trying to escape. Because every time you change your space, you change what your brain expects. And expectation drives behavior more than discipline ever will. The same goes for people. Your circle is part of your environment too. Spend enough time around people who normalize procrastination, laziness, and excuse making, and you'll start calling it balance instead of calling it out. But surround yourself with people who live with urgency, who are always evolving, who challenge you, and suddenly your own pace speeds up. You grow by association. If your environment